in the infamous words that the art talks have become known for, good morning and good afternoon wherever you are in the art world.
Right.
Um, so, Greg, I actually discovered your photography on LinkedIn. Somebody had posted some images of your 7 Days of Garbage series.
Right.
It intrigued me right away. I reached out to you, and you were kind enough to respond. I went onto your website and looked at some more of your work. Um, and I was actually taken at how you made garbage kind of look good with people in,
Sexy garbage, huh?
right? I mean, who would have thought that garbage could be sexy? Um, but how did the inspiration come to you? And more importantly, how did you get people to agree to lie in 7 days of garbage?
It's funny. I've been asked this question, and I have to go way back to my childhood because even when I was a little kid, I started doing photography. I think maybe when I was about 10 years old, and I was interested in garbage even then. And we had a neighbor who lived across the street who, produced this mountain of garbage, and I wondered even then. I was like, well, gosh. Where is all this going to end up? And I started kind of doing the math of, if just this one person has this much garbage, what if you multiply that by, and I looked into what the world population was, I think at the time. And I can't remember what the number was, but it was staggering even then. And this is in the 70s. So that's when it started. I had done other projects that connected to the theme, earlier on. And I did one, for instance, called Detritus.
Mhm.
Detritus is this sort of creature in our image, but made from our waste. It's sort of like our garbage shadow, you could say. And he kind of follows us around wherever we go. So I was doing shoots all over the world at that time, um, and for clients for magazines like Fortune magazine and stuff. So I'd go to Hong Kong or Tokyo, and I take detritus with me and pack them in my my luggage, and I take them out, and then I would do shoots with him in different places that I was shooting. So I did that, but I wanted to do a piece that really made it impossible to ignore, the problem, right? So how do you make it? How do you create a project like this? So I thought, what if I asked people to just save their garbage for a week, right, and then lay down in it and to be photographed as a way of kind of acknowledging how much waste we produce in the course of a week. And it was naturally it wasn't easy to to get people to go along with the plan, but I found that there were people like myself who were you know were were conscientious about the planet, or concerned about how much waste we generate, and they were kind of willing to do it just because they believed in the concept. And then there were people that I didn't want just one kind of group of people in the picture. So there were some people I paid because I felt, hey, this is a kind of a commitment. You have to actually save the garbage. You have to show up at my house, and you have to, wait while I arrange it around you. I mean, and it's not a pleasant, especially when it's a 90-degree day in LA and you're laying in your stinky garbage. So, but it was interesting because some people um actually cleaned up their garbage. I actually had a guy who even like washed the eggshells before he's a very fastidious guy, and he cleaned his garbage before he showed up. And then there were some people, who just edited out the really smelly stuff, you
Mhm.
know. So yeah, there was a range of responses and reactions. But I think it was a great teaching moment, I think, for a lot of the people, especially people with kids. And I've been asked, what can I do to kind of change my footprint, and can I have an impact? And I always say, yeah, there are lots of little things you can do, and I think we're all familiar with them. But I think one of the more impactful things you can do is talk to your kids and show them. And this was like, I had a family with little kids, and the kids were asking their parents when they went to the grocery store why everything was wrapped in plastic, and And I remember I photographed myself and my family too, because I wanted it to be kind of a teaching moment for my son as well, who at the time I think was about, gosh, probably 8 years old, maybe. And I had to bribe him too to be in the picture. I had to promise him a chocolate cupcake. But but you know, with kids, you don't know how much they're impacted, how much what impression has been made. But a few weeks after the shoot, we were riding around the car, and he kind of spontaneously started talking about, Hank is his name, spontaneously talking about plastic. He said, "Wow, that 100 years ago there wasn't one plastic thing on Earth, but now you could build a tower of plastic bottles that would reach the moon." You could see him just sort of like this revelation happening in his eyes. So it's things like that, I think, that
And
kind of make it worthwhile.
it really is very powerful. I mean, I just saw it on LinkedIn, and I'm talking about my phone, right? So it's not a big image, but it grabbed me right away. Uh,
Hmm.
and I just needed to find out more. Just again, we do a lot of things around sustainability, and I think
Right.
portraying sustainability in ways that people can connect to, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
It's still difficult. I mean, in Europe, everything is recycled, it's great. But at the end of the day, when you have something in your hand and you're not any quite close to recycling, you always go through that.
Hmm.
Oh, should I just throw it in the garbage? It'll just be easy. It's just this once, right? And then
Hmm.
something and you're like, no, because if I do it once, I'll do it again. I'm forming a habit, right? So you kind of force yourself to go beyond that thought. So I agree with you on educating children, right? And the
Yeah, yeah.
um,
I mean, we're kind of, as you say, as you were just describing, I was thinking of the term victims of comfort. you know
absolutely.
it's just a matter of, it's just easy. It's just too easy for us to be lazy and kind of not responsible, you know because I think where does the responsibility lie? I mean, you know General Electric could make a refrigerator, right, that keeps our beer cold for 400 years, but
Right.
if they did, they would go out of business.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
So we have this idea of planned obsolescence, and we're just use things, and this kind of model of using and throwing away is so ingrained in our economy, and that's how our economy grows, is through waste, essentially.
No,
So how does that not permeate our consciousness, our way of just of doing, and kind of acting automatically without even thinking about what we're doing. So,
absolutely. And I mean, I think change. I don't know if you know Stephanie Benedotto. She's known as the Queen of Raw. She's very active in the waste in the fashion industry, and so she
oh, okay,
business around it.
that's
Uh,
a huge, huge problem too. And I should do a project on what is it called? Instant fashion, or it's kind of throwaway fashion,
fast fashion.
fast fashion, and it's just deplorable. The
Absolutely.
the amount the amount of waste that's generated in that one sector. So
And
yeah.
unfortunately, we can't necessarily combat. So Stephanie's really good at finding solutions. So, for example, the business she started was buying unused textiles from companies, and then
Mhm.
she was saying, you know what? At the end of the day, it's made. Let's not make more. Let's use what we have.
Right. Yeah.
And I
I
think
know of another guy he goes by the moniker Zero Waste Daniel in
Mhm.
in New York, and he does the same thing. He creates fashion out of existing material, so there's no additional waste.
And I think we're going to see more and more of that. Also,
Yeah.
let's not forget that it's about collecting actively. I mean, there's so many
Uh,
people around the world who can't afford to buy clothes, and yet here we are throwing so much of it away, right? Doesn't
yeah.
it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you think about, in a way, it's sort of, um, there's something appealing about living, and it's romanticized, of course. But when you think about the pioneer days, going
Mhm.
back a couple hundred years, I mean, there was no garbage, there was no plastic waste, of course. But I mean, everything was used, everything. I mean, and everything lasted a long time. And now it's just such a throwaway culture. It's
Absolutely.
really
And
disturbing.
you can make correlation with social media and the way, where
Yeah.
there used to be a time where keeping up with the Joneses meant keeping up with somebody in your street. Today, it means
Mhm.
keeping up with anybody around the world, right? So now your
Right.
effect of keeping up with the neighbors is huge. Um,
Right, because your neighbors are now virtual. They're yeah. And of course, when you watch television sitcoms or any TV program that represents the middle class, people see all of these really nice houses and nice stuff and nice cars, right? And they think if that's middle class, then I should be able to. I'm middle class too. I should be able to afford that lifestyle. And it's a skewed lifestyle. It's not really representative of what you can buy on a middle class income.
no,
So
they've proven already that one of the biggest issues with social media is the fact that people are not posting their real life, right? They're posting a romanticized life.
yeah, it's yeah, that's a good point. It's interesting.
Um,
So
But you've given me actually the title for your article in the magazine in June, which is
oh, okay.
Comfort.
Sorry, I missed that. What?
The title is going to be Victims of Comfort.
Oh,
By
victims of comfort. Okay.
um, and
I don't
it's
know if that applies to, since we're talking about other projects I've done. I don't know if you could kind of put that umbrella around
um,
around all of the pieces, but certainly the garbage.
let's think about it because there's another couple of series that really intrigue me because I
Yeah.
was by the way you put people into categories. And so I was drawn immediately to Daily and Undaily Bread, which used a very similar concept.
Right, right. They're definitely they're linked projects, and in fact, the food project grew out of the garbage project because in the process of shooting people with their waste, the thing that really struck me the most and was most disturbing in a way was the amount of plastic packaging, food packaging primarily in our garbage, and so that got me thinking, how is this kind of revolution in the way that food has been produced and distributed affecting our diets? And obviously, there's a link there, and because we weren't eating processed packaged food a couple of generations ago, and now we are, and so I that's how Daily Bread kind of was born, and I thought, well, should I focus? What age should I? And I thought, well, I should focus on kids really because, eating habits form when we're young, right? And they often last a lifetime, and they're very hard to change once they're ingrained. And so I decided to ask kids, in much in the same way that I ask people to save their garbage. I asked kids to keep a record of everything they ate for a week, and then kind of turn in these journals of their meals. And I hired cooks. In fact, for each shoot I did, I think there were about 3 people working nonstop in the kitchen all day to generate, because we had to replicate everything that the kids had eaten in the course of a week. And we were shooting 4 or 5, sometimes 6 kids in a day. So it was an exhaustive, undertaking
Sure.
to do this. Yeah.
And so then there was the other one, the Undaily Bread. And so tell me about
Right. Well, that grew out of a call I got from an advertising guy in Colombia who proposed doing a project with gosh, what is the name of that? A charitable organization that's focused on providing food and basic meeting the basic needs of the poor. I'm trying to remember the name of the organization. It's just escaped me. But anyway, um, say again.
UNESCO.
Yeah, I think it's that's right. Yeah, I think it was UNESCO. Um, anyway, so we decided to do, because I had focused on many aspects of diet, but really hadn't tackled the problem of what about people who are really not getting enough to eat at all? Because I mean, if you look at you know, the problem today is that many of the cultures, many of the places in the world that we're not getting enough to eat are now getting too much to eat. It's kind of a, they're getting all of the wrong things to replace the lack of food that they had. But there are people who are simply not getting enough, and one of those groups is refugees from Venezuela who were coming into to Bogota, and often just traveling with what they could carry, and so we decided to photograph them with the food that they ate during their travels and the things that they carried with them, which were shockingly few, uh, and then to tell their stories. And this was not a full-blown project the way that Daily Bread was. We really just took a day and photographed, I think, 5 kids, and some of the subjects were mothers and their kids. So
No, there's a very interesting novel I read recently called American Dirt, which
okay.
recounts the journey from Latin America and South America to the US border,
Uh-huh.
and just all the challenges, the horrendous trip that it is. And
Hmm.
I recognize in some of your pictures, um, the photos or the videos I've seen of mothers and the children traveling, either escaping, looking for a better life, or just escaping economies. And when you put all of this together, it's incredible that in 2023 we still have such things happening, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that gives me that's a thought that just kind of flipped a switch, that might be something to return to, is this idea of mothers and children traveling, just trying to get to a place, and in the case of the kids I photographed from Venezuela, there was a mother who, that was her mission, was just to get her son out of Venezuela and to a place where he could have a meaningful life, and to have the basic necessities, shelter and food,
Mhm.
so
And, that's the
I
part we
think
don't
that,
understand is where
yeah, yeah.
with our vision. And it's very difficult to understand that somebody lives in such conditions that, there's so
Mhm.
much violence. I think the U.S. State Department actually increased the risk to go to 2 countries. I think it's Colombia and Jamaica, where the criminality is through the roof, lack of food,
Really?
no jobs. I mean, it's absolutely
Uh-huh. I'm
terrible.
I'm surprised to hear Colombia in a way, because people are going from Venezuela to Colombia, and then that's not a sounds like it's not a safe place to be either.
Not at all. But I'll
Yeah.
send you the book that I read because I think it'll give you a good
You
perspective.
said it's called American Dirt? No, it's called for some reason you're muted when I'm talking, so
American Dirt.
American Dirt. Okay. All right, I'll look for that.
And you'll
Thank
see
you.
it's a very good book. And I think it actually lends itself to a lot of photographic projects from, excuse me, from, you know, trains to trip on trains to what a column of people migrating together looks like. Um,
Uh-huh.
but to stay in terms, because I am going to justify the title Victims of Comfort, but
Okay.
I may actually take you a little bit out of comfort into discomfort.
Okay.
Not sure. Um, so I shared how I went on your website and saw more of the series that you had made, and then I saw one called The Sum of Us, and
Mm-hmm.
it blew me away, and it was a magical moment for me because all of
Hmm.
a sudden
Okay.
your photography became very personal, and it
Hmm.
became downright fine art. At first, I
Huh.
thought you
Okay.
were paintings.
Well, I guess, they are on some level. I mean, it's certainly a form of painting, I guess. I mean, to classify them, I might call them palimpsests.
Hmm.
I don't know if you're familiar with that
Yes.
term. Okay, you are. All right. I don't know if your audience is. Maybe we should
Yeah,
uh,
explain, please.
describe it. Yeah. From my understanding, the palimpsest it goes back to manuscripts that were written long ago, and there wasn't enough material to write on, so they would reuse existing manuscripts and write over top of, layer the text on top of existing text, and you get this kind of, you get this layering of time, in a sense, the past kind of bleeding through into the present. And so that seemed like a useful metaphor for the project that I wanted to do, which was which was a way to kind of make time simultaneous. And that's been a motif, I guess you could say, in a lot of the projects that I've done and I think photography is uniquely equipped to address this idea of simultaneity of past and present. And to me, that simultaneity of past and present is in a way the key to all art, you might say, and something that we wrestle with as artists. And it's nostalgia, really, and I think because you can have the past in memory and you can relive it in memory, but yet you can't fully have it, and so that kind of tension between having and not having, between having and losing, and is a key, really, to what I'm doing, and I think a key to a lot of art. But so I at the time when I started this, it started about my brother who kind of went off the rails. He's bipolar, and he went off his meds, and he came out to visit me, and I knew right away that he was, in serious trouble. And when he went back to New York, he ended up losing his apartment and living on the streets, and ended up actually incarcerated for a little while. And so, but during this time, I kind of thinking about, well, where are the seeds to his mental illness? And I found myself kind of digging through old family photographs and kind of poring over pictures of him, as if I might find the answer there. And of course, I didn't really find the answer, but I kind of wanted to reconcile his childhood self with his adult self, and to kind of find the continuity there somehow. And I began melding the pictures together and layering them, kind of like a palimpsest. And I know that term has been adopted in art as well. And there are other artists who are doing this as well. But so I've done this, and then it expanded to other members of the family, because you can't really simply make it about one person, because we're all connected, and our relationships are so deeply rooted in us that they become part of the story as well. And so I've been focusing on my mother and stepfather and father, and in addition to my brother and myself as well. And so it's odd to make your my wife said to me at one point, she says, it's interesting, because when you put yourself in the pictures, you're kind of on the outside looking in, which I guess is always been my kind of role as a photographer, is this sort of slightly detached, apart from the scene, taking it in.
We're going to go back to that, but there was one photograph specifically that was incredibly painterly, and I was mom with her 3 future husbands, I think is what it was called.
Okay. Yeah.
That literally had me stumped. I really thought I was looking at a painting.
Okay.
So
Well, I do some of the layers are drawing. So I put the photograph is in there, and then I kind of draw on top of the photograph, and then each aspect I might do a layer in white, and then another layer in black, and then they become sandwiched together, so you have kind of this feeling of brushstrokes a little bit, I think, and but yet it still is photographic, because it is the base material, the origin is a picture. Yeah, but that's a funny story, because my mother, well, not funny, but I don't know, my mother had kind of abandonment issues, and because her father left her with tuberculosis when she was about 3. Wow. And so she had a lifelong kind of complex about needing to be attractive to men, and like wanting to go in a bar and just stare at a man until he came over and sat next to her. Mm-hmm. And so I did this picture of her as a child, surrounded by the three of her future husbands, which is kind of a comical title, I guess, because only there's like three seems like enough, but there were more than that actually. And so and they're all, it's a little weird because they're all adults, and she's this kid, but she had a reputation even as a kid for having everyone wrapped around her little finger. And so so here are these three future husbands surrounding her, and she's like looking who am I going to choose kind of
Mhm.
look on her face. So
So we only have 10 minutes left, and so
yeah.
I in continuation to what we just to what you just shared, thank you very much. Uh,
Hmm.
we did another art talk on Saturday with two dear friends, Mariam Eisler and Henry Lohmeyer, both photographers. You'd like them very much, amazing people. And in talking, it was actually a revelation that photography was very therapeutical for them. Um,
Right.
is that something that you share as a process when you take doing photography?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's a way of, as we just were talking about with this Some of Us project, it's kind of, dealing with family skeletons and kind of coming to terms with things. It's sort of like exercising demons, or it's
Mhm.
um yeah, it's a way of making amends. Maybe it's a way of processing, because all the while I'm sitting there working on a picture, I'm kind of doing a life review in a way, and just sort of re reconsidering, like relationships with loved ones, and how how we're connected. And so yeah, so it is definitely a therapeutic process. And yeah, no, it's a way of making sense of the world, really, is what it comes down to. And that can be your own personal world and your own personal problems or challenges, and on a more, all the way to a more kind of global level, which is generally the topics that I address are more kind of global than personal. But
And it's interesting because the misconception, I guess, is that a photographer is a voyeur, right? You're taking photos
right,
of people,
yeah,
but it
yeah,
turns out that it's also a lot of exhibitionism, right? You put a lot of yourself into the picture, not always obviously. Uh,
hmm,
and we're discussing how sometimes you take a photo and you think
yeah,
you've captured something, but
yeah,
then you go home, you develop it, or you look at it
yeah.
on a digital camera and you're like, wow,
Develop it. What? Yeah.
you know?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And the reaction is, "Wow, I didn't think I took that shot at all." In fact, I didn't even realize I was taking this picture, for example, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It does reveal something about the author, no doubt. And I was sitting and thinking the other day, and I was reading a piece in the New Yorker about Preston Sturgis, the filmmaker, and there was a note about Sturgis that I felt I kind of identified with, which is um, this idea that how someone presents himself, through their actions, their behavior, their appearance, whatever name they decide they're going to take for themselves, is as important and as revelatory as their quote true self.
Hmm.
Uh-huh. And so I'm interested in that tension between who we believe we are and how the rest of the world sees us, right? And
Yeah.
there's definitely a tension in that, and kind of even an absurdity, right? And there's I think a potential in that tension for surprise, and for kind of a compelling picture.
And how
And sorry, go ahead.
how sometimes an environment can subconsciously trigger something that we don't even realize, right? A memory, a
Yeah.
déjà vu, and all of a sudden you're not looking at the same place anymore, the same person anymore. It's becoming its own little animal, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. But yeah, identity is something that has always kind of been fascinating to me, and how we present ourselves to others, and how different that image is from the way the world sees us. So
And so, do you think that that's something that another photographer could capture how you're perceived, or is that something that you think you can figure out by yourself?
Well, I mean, I think it's just I think there are different personas that we have, and when we you know, we have a different persona with our parents than we do with our friends and with our colleagues. It's another side of ourselves. So it's just a matter of different dimensions, really. I don't know that there's one set like way that we're seen, but yeah, I mean that's I anyway, yeah,
Yeah.
it's
I think we're going to have to do another interview where we're going to discuss that
perhaps.
more deeply.
Yeah, no, there's so many little alleyways that we can wander down and that are all rich and have a lot to teach us and expose us to. So
No, and I'll put you together with other photographers so that you can have that conversation. I think this is something that, kind of brainstorming, bouncing.
uh-huh.
In the last couple of minutes that we have, what is the project you're working on now?
Well, I'm working on the Sum of Us. It's still it's an ongoing project, but I'm also I'm deciding whether or not I did a project on the public pool, which I think I may return to as well. And then I've been working on a piece on uh, cultural activities or customs and traditions and just jobs that may be threatened, um, you know, because they're going the way of the cart and buggy, and our world is changing so rapidly. And so I'm thinking of focusing on some of these jobs that'll be lost and presenting them in a way that makes us consider them more deeply, by context, by juxtaposition, which is something that I've always that I always found as a great tool for making it impossible for people. The idea is to try to make a picture, that I call that it has stopping power, that makes you stop in your tracks. And so again, taking this subject and dealing with it in a way that has this this stopping power impact.
Yeah,
But
think
so I don't want to reveal what it is until it's further along. But yeah, the context, just like with the garbage series, the juxtaposition of beautiful natural environments that are being sullied by garbage. And so the kind of the implication is that we have all of these locations like a beach or a forest or a pool of water that's been irrevocably altered by the stuff that we produce.
right. No, and we're going to have another one of these interviews very soon because we had a great conversation around something to do with losing jobs before we
Oh,
get
okay.
interviews.
Oh,
I think we're going to be talking a lot. But again, thank you so much, Greg. I so appreciate your time. It
you.
was
No, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. Oh, no, Francois. Yeah.
you, Greg, and we'll be posting in this virtual reality several of your work so people can familiarize themselves. I think your work needs to be seen, and
Good.
just as a photographer, but as an artist. And I'm sure that people are going to love a lot of your work. Some of it for sustainability, but the sum of us is going to blow people's mind without a doubt.
Great. All right. Well, I hope you're right.
You know what? Again, we shall see, but I will make sure to put it in front of people because I love what you do. Thank you so much for everything, Greg.
Thank you, Francois. All right. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.